I watched The Substance yesterday. Really great movie. I really enjoyed it. Gave you a lot to talk about, so I want to talk about some of it now. It's kind of like Cinderella meets Picture of Dorian Gray with a splash of Carrie and some like poor things, is what I noticed. It's probably got some other connotations. My friend noticed like the Elephant Man, but some things that are maybe really obvious to other people, but I haven't seen those things, so I don't know to make those comparisons. But I thought it was great how it blended in themes from different things like that and things you can relate to addiction or aging or whether you steal from your younger self or steal from your older self and just all sorts of philosophy to talk about. My friend and I talked about it for like an hour and would have talked more if we didn't have to go to work uh, right after the movie, and probably we'll talk about it more when we meet up again. Just because it's that type of movie, thought provoking, conversation provoking, like it sets a table of a couple of lattes for you to have a discussion about these themes without, I guess in some ways it makes some judgment or makes some statements one way or another, but it's really kind of cool like that to weave in these different themes without taking one or the other of them to such a degree that it has a definitive statement about it, leaving kind of an open conversation for things. So it was very interesting in that way. It was very sexy and beautiful in the nudity. The nudity was not sexualized, but it was beautiful nudity, and that was something that I had discussion with my friend about. Everybody was great in the movie for one thing. All the actors and all the writing and the filmmaking and just everything was really great. Um, it was kind of poor things in that sense of being like, oh, this is feminist, so we're going to break with some current traditions that are anti-sex and anti-woman by showing nudity or sex. This didn't really show, again, sexualized nudity, but it did show nudity more in the context of people looking at their own bodies. And the most sexualized parts of it were the aerobics scenes, which, you know, if you're from the 80s, you can relate to that. And it was interesting in lots of ways, thought provoking in lots of ways. There's a scene early on where the main villain guy is saying, you know, I give them what they want. And over his shoulder, there's a waitress with really nice legs bending over with a short skirt, serving food, maybe somewhat out of focus. But I learned from, painstakingly learned from 3, 4 hours watching that Cats movie, how to deal with situations like this. Like the Cats movie is not absolutely terrible. It's um, it's a matter of if you can keep your focus on the cat girl who is really beautiful throughout the movie, then you can enjoy it. And here's my cat to remind me of that. This cat that lives here is making an appearance. But there's a guy who's constantly like, "Woo!" Says, "Here, try it." You can look at this cat, or you can. There's this guy who's just aggressively, trumpily attacking the camera with his face, and if you just don't look at that guy and look at the beautiful girl who's on screen almost all the time that he's there, then you can enjoy the movie. And so I just did not look at the extremely ugly guy sitting there in an extreme close up, telling you, eating a shrimp, telling you, you know, what his plan was. You just focus over his shoulder at the girl's nice legs, even though it's out of focus. And I learned that from Cats. But you can see how, like, the idea, my friend's asexual and mentioned that, you know, the overabundance of butt shots, you know, was to like wear you down or disgust you. It's like actually never could be too many butt shots. Like actually could have been entirely butt shots, and yeah, you would have missed the rest of the entire plot of the movie, but it still would have been good. Still would have been a lot better than a lot of other movies because it was artistically presented. The butts look fantastic, you know. It was like it's artistically presented, but it that gets into my complaint as well. Is while it doesn't show nudity sexualized and therefore kind of undoes some of that in or in some way shows that in a mocking or a critique type of way. um it still objectifies bodies, and that to me is a different type of danger than sexual objectification, just pure objectification of the body. And the midway point or a compromise between those that happens in movies is presenting nudity as art. Like I'm reminded of there's a lesbian scene in a sex scene in The Hunger, the David Bowie, Susan Sarandon, Catherine Deneuve movie, where they have sex and it's portrayed, but it's artistically filmed and artistically presented as like this is artistic. And this is artistic too. There's definitely a very artsy element to it, but it's not as though the nudity is maybe sometimes presented artistically, not so much presented sexually, more presented in like that self-reflective type of way, or to get at people's psychology and state. And I heard Demi Moore talking about this on an interview just yesterday as well. I actually don't really know a lot of her movies. I almost met her, or she crossed our paths. We went down to the scene where they were filming G.I. Jane in Florida, but I haven't seen a whole lot of her movies. But I just got the impression she hasn't been given the roles or the opportunity to act like this, that this would be her, star performance, or as she said in the interview, the beginning of her real roles in movies, that she hasn't been able to live up to her potential. So really excited about that, really excited about people being excited about this movie and seeing it and talking about it and enjoying it. But it did kind of concern me that as much as it's kind of feminist in that Poor Things way, like let's present something from a woman's perspective or sympathetic to women instead of, the opposite in Hollywood, it still had some of the tropes of horror movies, like, hey, if anybody's going to have sex, something bad's going to happen, and it's kind of demonized sex itself, and had the objectification of the body, even if it's not sexual objectification, is kind of got a fascist tendency, the same as being anti-sex or sexual repression does, and probably unintentionally, you know, repeated some of these horror movie tropes to be afraid of sex, to be afraid of intimacy, to be afraid of everything. And that was partly to tell the character story, but you could also think, like I called the substance and the creator of the substance a villain in my interpretation of it, and my friend thought it was more of an agent, more neutral agent. And I was like, well, no, a more, you could be a more heroic agent by overcoming people's um, programming and repression about sex and aging and all these different things. So it was a very interesting movie. I look forward to your comments about it and your comments about my comments about it. But it was fun and enjoyable, and I hope everybody enjoys it and gets something good out of it. And especially good luck to all the actors and everybody involved, because y'all did a great job. And so I think if this helps your career break through in a new way, you deserve it, and we deserve it to have people's careers and the whole industry change by new ways of looking at things, and changing the patriarchy and in the patriarchy in Hollywood and in our culture. Thank you.